Welcome to Divine Intervention, shedding light on Illinois property tax.
Hello and welcome back to Divine Intervention, shedding light on Illinois property tax with Nora Divine. Nora has been a property tax attorney in private practice since 2005. She has developed a statewide practice in all jurisdictions in Illinois, and she represents all property classes. I'm Kevin Rosenquist, and today's episode breaks down the mail you receive about property taxes. Nora's going to explain what each letter means, what deadlines apply, and which envelopes actually require action. Nora, good to see you.
Thank you.
Could you explain the main types of mail property owners should expect about their taxes and how they might differ between Cook County and the rest of Illinois?
Sure. Whether you're in Cook County or you're not in Cook County, you should receive a reassessment notice if there has been some change in your property's assessment. This is because in the United States of America, we have a constitution, we have constitutional rights. One of those rights is we have a right to due process, and that's the opportunity to be heard after we've been given notice of some kind of a government action that's being taken against our property. So you can imagine if your assessment is going to double, in many cases, it means that your property taxes could double as well. And so that is something that the government has to alert you about. And if you're not alerted, then you can't take action. So the reason they have to notify you is so that you can avail yourself of whatever opportunity to be heard may exist in the system.
Okay. And let's focus on Cook County for a second. What information appears on an assessment notice and what should owners do when one arrives?
Sure. So the assessment notice is the time to react. And, unlike other states, we need to respond to assessment notices. We can't wait for the tax bill to come out because in Illinois, once the tax bill is issued, it's 99% impossible to get the assessment reduced at this point. So it's the assessment notice that is the most important thing that's going to come to your house. And if it looks like it's going up a lot, that means your taxes are probably going to go up a lot. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't take these assessment notices seriously because they're not a bill and they don't require them to pay anything at that moment. And so usually it's a bill that they will take more seriously because it requires some payment on their part. So unfortunately, when people do get the bill, a lot of times it's 12 to 18 months too late to contest the assessed value in Illinois. So on an assessment notice, you will have your taxpayer of record information. So that's your name and your address. It'll have the property address. It'll have the property index number, which is a PIN. And that's something that, anyone will ask you for if they're looking at your property to see if they can help you with your assessment. The first question they're going to ask is, what is the PIN? And so some people are saying I don't even know what a PIN is. And I'm thinking, oh no, this is going to be tough,
It'll be a long day.
because who knows how many things they've received that they could have acted on and didn't, they don't even know what their PIN is.
Mm-hmm.
So the PIN is always on your assessment notice. It's always on your tax bill. It's also on your deed. If you have that handy, it's on your title insurance policy, and your closing attorney should know what your PIN is if you can't find it anywhere. But it is in all those places. So it's like 2 numbers and a dash and 2 more numbers and a dash and 3 numbers and a dash and then 4 numbers is how you see most of the counties format it, but it could be formatted differently in different counties as well. Sometimes they're a little wonkier. But basically, your assessment notice has your PIN, property address. It may have some property characteristic information, like how many square feet is this above ground living area, whether or not there's a finished basement, whether or not there's how many bathrooms, and whether or not there's a garage, is it attached or detached. So depending on where you are, the assessment notice may have a lot of information on it, or it may have very little information on it.
I love that you said wonky, by the way. It's a very Midwestern word. People,
is it?
I say that around here. I'm in Colorado now. I say that and people are like, what? I don't know. So Cook County will also issue a first installment and a second installment tax bill. What's the difference between those? Why do they come at different times?
In Cook County, there's 1.8 million PINs, and maybe 360,000 of them are under appeal any given year. So it takes quite a bit of time for the Board of Review to work its way through its appeal work. And there's 120 employees, give or take, at the Board of Review, and they work really hard to hear appeals in every single township, every single year. But they usually can't finish up their work any earlier than the middle of April. We've seen them finish earlier, and we've seen them finish a lot later. Mm-hmm. But it's very difficult to finish any quicker than mid-April, I would say. So until the Board of Review is finished with their appeal work in the middle of April, we do not know what the aggregate assessment is of all the parcels in the county. And until we know what the aggregate assessment is for all the parcels in the county, the clerk cannot compute what the property tax rates are for each taxing district. Because to figure out what the tax rate is, that's a function of two numbers. The first number is the aggregate assessment. So if you add up the assessed value of every single parcel in each and every individual taxing district, then you get the aggregate assessment for that taxing district. Number two, the other number you're worried about is the levy for each taxing district that is touching and concerning each of these parcels. So on any given piece of property, you may have between 8 and 12 different taxing districts like listed on the tax bill. So you can see them broken out. The school district, maybe there's one, maybe there's two school districts on the same tax bill. They may be getting 60 to 65% of the total bill. And the rest of the bill is being broken up among other taxing districts, such as the municipality, the county, the park district, the forestry district, the mosquito abatement district, if you're in Cook County. So the second installment tax bill is the one that's going to show you all that detailed information, because the second installment tax bill is issued after all of this math is done. And this math, first and foremost, cannot be done until the Board of Review is done with the appeals, because you cannot know what the aggregate assessment is until the appeal work is done.
Sure.
So for that reason, all the detailed information, all the final tax liability is going to be on your second installment bill. So what's on your first installment bill? And the answer is almost nothing, because it's simply an estimation of whatever the tax liability was the year before. The first installment bill is just 55% of whatever the taxes were last year. And so it can cause problems for closing attorneys who don't understand this fact, because they could be in the middle of a closing. They could have a first installment tax bill in front of them, and they may not realize that the assessment changed dramatically from last year to this year. It could have gone up a lot, or it could have gone down a lot, which means the taxes could be increasing a lot or decreasing a lot. But that first installment bill is simply 55% of whatever last year's bill was. And then they basically true it up in the second installment bill once they're able to finalize the appeal work, get all the levies from the taxing districts, combine those two numbers together to figure out what the local rate is for each and every taxing district. And then for each property, you add up the local rate for all the taxing districts that appear on that tax bill, and that gives you your total local property tax rate for that property.
Wow. So yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because as you were explaining it, I realized that it would make it difficult to sort of predict what that second installment's going to be. If you're trying to, you kind of have no way of doing that, do you?
No, the second installment is going to be, here's your final tax liability, and we're going to deduct whatever you paid for the first installment, which may or may not have any relation to what this year's final tax liability is, because it was simply 55% of whatever you paid last year. And in Illinois, you can have wide fluctuations from year to year in the property tax, unlike other jurisdictions. Other jurisdictions, they do insulate taxpayers from increases beyond X percent, whatever that is in that jurisdiction. In Illinois, we don't have that. Your tax bill can double here and it can triple here from one year to the next.
Man, that's crazy. So outside of Cook County, do owners get both installments in the spring?
Yes. So they get one mailing, they get it in the spring.
Okay.
And it shows your total tax liability is X. You're going to pay half of it now within the next 30 days, and you're going to pay the other half September 1st. So it's a little more straightforward out there, and there's not as much guessing, well into the third quarter of the calendar year. Maybe
this is a dumb question, but that's okay. I've asked many dumb questions in my life. Why is it different from Cook County to outside of Cook County?
Well, I mean, think about 360,000 PIN numbers being under appeal, and there's 1.8 million PINs. So it's not just an astronomical number of parcels being appealed. It's a large percentage of all the PINs in the county being appealed. Like, we don't see that kind of appeal activity in any other county in the state of Illinois in terms of percentage of overall number of pins or just a flat number. So they're able to wrap that work up. Like Will County's already done, I think, and DuPage will be done. They're usually the last one to finish. They'll be done like by the end of January. Lake County, I think they're going to be done by the end of December. So, I mean, they're ending their appeal work 4 months, 5 months earlier than Cook County does in some cases. Not in all cases, but in a lot of cases.
Okay, that makes sense. So what about delinquency notices? What's the most important thing to check first if you receive one?
Sometimes people get a delinquency notice because something went wrong with their tax escrow with their bank, and the bank like paid the wrong amount or they paid on the wrong PIN. So it can take some work to figure out why the taxes are unpaid if you are surprised by the fact that they're unpaid. If you knew that they were unpaid because you decided to not pay that bill this month and maybe pay it next month, then it's simple. It's just basically 0.75% penalties and interest per month. And then you have by the next penalty date to clean up that balance before they tack on another 0.75% onto the amount due.
Okay. And then there's a 10-day notice when taxes are really, really overdue, at least in some
No,
counties.
the 10-day notice is rare, but
Okay.
you see it when, say, the assessor had already wrapped up their books and given the books to the board of review, and then the assessor found something else after they turned their books in. So the assessor decided to make a recommendation to the board. In some counties, they call it an assessor recommendation. In some counties, they call it a board recommendation. But it's some change that the assessor is triggering, or sometimes the board can do it themselves on their own motion. But it triggers a notification requirement that a notice has to go to the taxpayer. Hey, this change is being made to your property. You have 10 days to respond to this. Those are pretty serious, and you should always ask somebody what they mean and what triggered the change. Sometimes these changes are not legal. Sometimes they're chasing a sale, which they're not supposed to be doing. Sometimes they're doing something irregular that somebody with expertise needs to take a look at and help you understand if it's a legal change is being made.
I know that there's a lot of times when in these situations that letters can look official but are actually solicitations from appeal companies or law firms. We've all seen ones from warranty companies, from I've had some from tax bills too that look legit but they're not. How do you recommend people tell the difference?
Well, if you live in a neighborhood with a decent amount of property value, you get a lot of solicitation from both attorneys and non-attorneys who are offering their tax appeals services to you. And it can be hard to understand who to hire when you have a stack of 10 or 15 mailers in your house and you're like, oh, they're all telling me I'm overassessed and they're all, telling me I should appeal and that I should hire them. And it is hard to separate those out and see like which ones of them would be worth hiring and which ones of them are following the rules in terms of how they're advertising, because a lot of them don't. Like an attorney is not supposed to promise an outcome, but yet we get all these mailers saying your assessment should be this, which means your tax bill should be that. And I am still getting mail from a property that I sold and sold it for like $1.25 million. And I'm getting mail from one of these, it's actually an attorney behind this firm. And they're sending out these like complicated like grids and numbers and graphs and saying, your property should be assessed at $867,000. And I'm thinking fascinating, but what assessing official is going to agree that my property should be assessed that low when I literally just sold it for so much more than that? So I think that it's a little misleading to send that kind of mail out to taxpayers, kind of promising that type of result when the reality is it's very hard to get around a recent purchase price that's a lot higher than the value that you're asking for. So that bothers me. And then
he sent that letter to the wrong person.
Well, I don't care. But I mean, and then it's like you've got a lot of non-attorney tax reps and they're allowed to represent others at the assessor, which I think is improper. I don't think it should be allowed, but it is allowed. But after that, their non-attorneys are not allowed to represent people at the Cook County Board of Review or at the Illinois Property Tax Appeal Board. So I advise people there's no point in hiring a non-attorney tax rep because they're not going to be able to close this file for you at the assessor level of appeal. You're going to have to go further. You're going to have to go to the board of review. You're going to have to go to the property tax appeal board or to circuit court. And you have to be an Illinois licensed lawyer to go to any of those three places. So what they say sometimes is like, and if we need a lawyer for you, we'll go hire a lawyer for you. And it's like, wait a minute, like, who does this lawyer represent?
Yeah.
Is this lawyer beholden to me? Is this lawyer beholden to you? And that's a very important question. And sometimes the lawyer doesn't even know who their boss is. And it's very important for lawyers to know that they cannot serve two masters. All of their ethical obligations have to run to the actual property taxpayer and the actual property owner. You can't be beholden to the person who's signing your check. It doesn't work. You know, there's opinion after opinion from bar associations, and there's disciplinary cases, and there's a lot of information out there that this arrangement really doesn't work for consumers.
Some mail mentions omitted assessments or back tax bills. What does that mean?
Oh, those you want to take very seriously.
Is it hard to verify that the amounts are accurate before they pay?
Oh, I wouldn't recommend paying an omitted assessment bill when you get it, because there's so many defenses built into the statute that 90% of the time, you know, somebody can probably make some kind of an argument or a defense for you on an omitted assessment. So you should always have somebody look at those.
Okay. So basically, if there's anything on there saying that you need to pay more or pay something different, get it checked out. With one exception,
and there is a pretty draconian system in place to charge people for what they say is erroneous homestead exemptions. So an erroneous homestead exemption is when you took a homeowner's exemption or a senior exemption or a senior freeze exemption or some type of an exemption that is only for people who own and live in the property, and you actually just own the property, but you actually live somewhere else, which means that you should not have taken the benefit of those homeowners exemptions. In that case, if you get one of those you can mostly just pay, because there's almost no defenses to those. Those
Really?
are pretty tough. The only defense is I actually live there, in which case you prove you live there. But then you may have an issue with you took an exemption then in some other state, because what they're doing is they're using sophisticated research tools to cross-reference who's taking homeowners exemptions in Illinois versus who's taking them in other states too. So if you are an individual taking a homeowner's exemption in more than one state, it's likely that they will notice at some point and send you a bill for the property tax benefit that you received that you should not have.
Okay. So they'll eventually get there, but okay, that makes sense.
But for an omitted assessment that's based on a property that was missed, like a new construction structure, or the land, or if it used to be exempt and then it was sold to a non-exempt entity, like those types of omitted assessments, there's quite a few defenses available under the property tax code, and you should definitely have a lawyer look into those.
Well, good stuff to know, as always, Nora. And yes, please, by all means, if you're out there and your mailbox is filling up with property tax paperwork and you're not sure what needs attention and what doesn't, contact Nora and her team at the Divine Law Group. They can help you sort it all out and avoid costly mistakes. Visit thedivinelawgroup.com to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That's it for today's episode of Divine Intervention, shedding light on Illinois property tax. Nora, so good to have you as always. Thanks.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.